The Iron Flag was loud that night, the kind of Marine bar where stories from old deployments mixed with the smell of beer and metal. Infantry Marines crowded the tables. Mechanics argued near the jukebox. A few older veterans leaned back in their chairs, watching everything with quiet eyes. Then the door opened, and a woman stepped inside. She wore a plain gray blouse and dark jeans. No unit patches, no rank. No sign that she belonged to any tribe in that room. To most of the Marines, she looked like a civilian who had wandered in by mistake. Heads turned. A couple of Marines laughed under their breath. Staff Sergeant Mason Cole, 28, broad-shouldered and confident, stepped directly in front of her. Without thinking, he gave her a light shove back toward the door and asked if she was lost. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She barely even moved. Her calmness made a few Marines snicker, and whispers spread across the bar. But before the tension could grow any further, an older Marine behind Cole suddenly collapsed, choking so violently his face began turning blue. The room froze in panic. And the quiet woman stepped forward with a steady focus that stopped everyone cold. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Lieutenant Commander Brooke Harlow had never cared much for noise, but she had promised an old Marine friend she would stop by the Iron Flag while she was in town. She kept her word quietly, slipping through the door without drawing attention. At 33, with 4 combat deployments behind her, she had learned how to enter any room without disturbing the air around her. She looked just like any other civilian tonight. Gray blouse. Dark jeans. No rank. No ribbons. No sign that she had once worked inside helicopters filled with dust and blood. No hint of the long nights she still carried with her. Nights lit by headlamps. Nights where she fought to keep one more heartbeat going. Most Marines saw only what was in front of them. And to them, she looked like nothing special. Brooke moved slowly, her eyes scanning the bar the same way she used to scan alleyways in Afghanistan. She had a habit of checking the exits first. Then she read faces, watching for tension or discomfort. She had done it so long, her mind did it without thinking. The Iron Flag was loud tonight, full of confidence, laughter, and liquor. She took a quiet breath and stepped inside. A few Marines noticed her right away. Most dismissed her even faster. Sergeant Kevin Rudd, 24, leaned over to his buddies with a grin. He was known for making jokes whether the moment needed one or not. "Looks like someone's lost," he said with a smile that was more teasing than mean. His friends chuckled. They didn't think she meant any harm, they just thought she didn't belong. Corporal Janie Sutter, only 21 and new to the bar scene, didn't laugh. He watched her carefully. Something about the way she stood, shoulders relaxed, eyes quiet, hands still, made him uncertain. She didn't have the nervous movement civilians usually had when stepping into a Marine bar. She looked too calm. Then there was Staff Sergeant Mason Cole. At 28, Mason had earned respect the hard way. Deployments, leadership, and a voice that always sounded sure of itself. He carried himself like a man used to handling problems the second he spotted them. But sometimes that confidence crossed into arrogance, especially after a few beers. He noticed Brooke, and irritation flared across his face. To him, she looked like someone seeking attention, someone trying to play soldier around real Marines. He didn't like that, not in his bar. He moved toward her with heavy steps and the authority of a man who believed he was protecting his space. He had no idea he was stepping right into the middle of a moment he would remember for the rest of his life. Brooke didn't see Mason first. Her attention had already shifted to the far side of the room, to a corner table where a large, older man sat alone. Master Gunnery Sergeant Walter Bear Jennings, 69, retired, legendary in every sense. Marine spoke his name with a mix of pride and fear. He had survived places most Marines only read about. Tonight he sat quietly, rubbing the back of his throat, coughing in a way that didn't sound right at all. Brooke noticed instantly. She didn't stare, didn't panic, didn't interrupt anyone. She only watched him the way a trauma surgeon watches the small details most people miss. The color of his skin, the tightness in his throat, the way his breath kept catching. She knew trouble long before anyone else did. But before she could move, Mason Cole stepped into her path. He squared his shoulders and spoke loudly enough for half the bar to hear. "You lost, ma'am?" Brooke looked up at him with steady eyes. Not fearful, not offended. Just calm. She said nothing yet. She didn't want a confrontation. She didn't want attention. She only wanted to keep her promise and check on the man in the corner before things got worse. But the room's energy was already shifting, and she could feel it. The Marines saw a quiet woman in civilian clothes. They had no idea they were looking at the one person in the bar who already knew a life was about to be in danger. Mason Cole didn't back off. If anything, the calm way Brooke looked at him only made him push harder. He stepped closer, voice firm, trying to guide her back toward the door. "You really shouldn't be in here," he said. "This is a Marine bar, not a tourist stop." Brooke kept her voice even. "I'm fine here, Sergeant." That single word, Sergeant, made him blink. Most civilians didn't know rank on sight. Most civilians didn't speak with that kind of quiet precision. It threw him off, but only for a moment. Pride can be louder than common sense. Around them, others began to notice the exchange. Sergeant Kevin Rudd leaned over the bar with a grin. Maybe she wandered in from the museum. They close early on weekends. A couple Marines laughed. Another added, "Probably here to find a Marine boyfriend." "Wrong place for that tonight." Someone else chimed in from the back, "She looks like she's never even held a rifle." The comments weren't vicious, just careless, the kind of teasing that comes from people who think they already understand the whole story. Brooke didn't react. She didn't flinch or fire back. She simply nodded once and said, "I'll only be a minute, I'm meeting someone." Her voice was steady, with no edge. That bothered Cole even more. He stepped directly in front of her, blocking her path as if she were ignoring him. But Brooke's attention had shifted. She wasn't thinking about Cole anymore. Her eyes drifted past him, toward the far corner where Master Gunnery Sergeant Walter Bear. Jennings sat hunched over his table. The cough she had noticed earlier was getting worse, sharper, deeper, higher in the throat. The kind of cough that pulls the whole body with it. She saw him grip the table. She saw his chest tighten. She saw his face start turning a shade that didn't belong in a bar filled with warm light. Cole noticed her looking past him and mistook it for disrespect. "Hey," he said, louder now, "I'm talking to you." She blinked once, calmly. "Sergeant, something's wrong." But before she could move, he stepped sideways, blocking her again, as if stopping her was the only job that mattered. The room's laughter softened into murmurs. Eyes began to track them. Marines who had been smiling now leaned back, sensing tension growing like a slow ripple across the bar. Someone whispered, "What's her problem?" Another added, "Why doesn't she just leave?" The air felt heavy. Even the jukebox seemed softer. Audience reflection moment. What would you have done in that moment? Would you stand your ground? Or just walk away to avoid the trouble? Brooke stayed still for a heartbeat longer. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. But something inside her sharpened. That same instinct she carried in combat zones, the one that always told her when a minute was about to matter. And then it happened. A chair scraped loudly across the wooden floor. A heavy body hit the ground. "Master Guns?" Jennings collapsed face first beside his table. A choking sound tore from his throat, and his hands clawed at the air as his oxygen vanished. His skin shifted from red to a frightening blue in seconds. The whole bar froze. Even Mason Cole turned, shot cutting through his irritation. Jennings was dying, and fast. Several Marines rushed forward at once, but none of them seemed to know what to do first. Someone yelled for water. Someone else shouted to call an ambulance. A younger Marine tried slapping Jennings on the back, but it only wasted precious seconds. Brooke didn't hesitate. Her calm snapped into motion with a force that made the room go dead quiet. She stepped around Cole before he could react, her footsteps fast but precise. She moved with a kind of purpose that didn't belong to a civilian or even most soldiers. It belonged to someone who had spent years making life or death decisions in the span of a single breath. "Move!" she said, not loud, but firm enough that Marines parted without question. Her voice was so steady, so sure, that even Cole felt his feet shift on their own. In that moment, the energy in the bar flipped completely. The woman they mocked minutes before was suddenly the only person in the room who looked like she knew exactly what she was doing, and every Marine felt it. Brooke dropped to her knees beside Jennings with a smoothness that didn't belong to any civilian. Her hands moved fast, but not rushed. Every motion had purpose. She tilted his head, checked his chest, and pressed 2 fingers against his neck with a precision that Corporal Jamie Sutter recognized immediately. It wasn't the sloppy, searching touch most people used. It was exact. It was deliberate. It was battlefield style. As she worked, the faint scars on her wrists caught the light. Thin, pale lines, the kind surgeons earned from years of gloves, clamps, and long nights in field hospitals. Nobody noticed them at first, but when her sleeve shifted, one Marine squinted and whispered, "Hold on, what kind of civilian has scars like that?" Brooke didn't hear him. Her whole focus was on Jennings. "Lay him flat," she said. "Spine neutral, head midline. No compressions yet, he's obstructed." Those words froze several Marines. No compressions yet. Spine neutral, head midline. Those weren't Google terms. Those weren't things someone picked up from a CPR class at a mall. That was trauma language, combat language. The kind you only learned when the difference between right and wrong meant life or death. Cole stared at her, confused. A minute ago, he thought she came here looking for attention. Now she was giving orders like someone who outranked half the room, without raising her voice once. Corporal Sutter watched even closer. He'd seen corpsmen in the field handle wounded Marines. He'd seen how their hands moved when seconds mattered. What Brooke was doing looked exactly like that. No wasted motion, no panic. She checked Jennings' carotid artery again, then leaned close to his face. "Airway is fully blocked," she said quietly. "He's not getting anything through." A hush rippled across the bar. Even the loudest Marines went still. Sergeant Rudd swallowed. How does she know that?" Nobody answered him. Brooke placed a hand on Jennings' chest and watched for rise and fall. Nothing. She pressed again, gently, feeling for subtle movement. Then she shook her head once, the kind of tiny motion you make when you know the truth and wish it wasn't so. "He's going cyanotic," she said. "He has seconds." Not minutes. Her tone wasn't dramatic. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply stating the reality, the way medical officers do when they've seen this too many times. Cole felt something cold move through him. He knew enough to understand, if she was right, the old Marine was in real danger. But what hit him harder was how she spoke, like she'd been here before. Like choking Marines was something she had dealt with in places far worse than a bar. Jennings's face had turned a frightening blue at the lips now. His hands clawed weakly at his throat before falling limp. Brooke placed both palms on the floor and leaned over him. "Clear space," she said. "I need room. All of you, back up." The Marines stepped away without thinking. Even Cole moved. It wasn't because she yelled. She didn't. It was something else. Something in her presence. Something in her voice. Authority that didn't need volume. Someone in the back whispered, "She sounds like she's done this under fire." Rudd nodded slowly. "Yeah, she does." Brooke held her hand out. "I need a knife." Every Marine froze again. A knife. Sutter looked around. Why a knife? What is she doing? Even Cole, tough as he was, felt his stomach tighten. He had seen improvised medical procedures in the field, but never inside a bar. Never by someone he didn't understand. Brooke didn't wait for their confusion to settle. "Knife," she repeated, still calm. "And whiskey." "No." Her voice sliced through the panic. No fear. No doubt. A bartender fumbled in a drawer and tossed a folding knife toward her. A Marine shoved a bottle of whiskey across the floor. Brooke caught both with steady hands. Marines exchanged wide-eyed looks. Is she serious? What's she about to do? Who the hell is she? Cole stepped forward, not to stop her this time, but because he genuinely didn't know what he was witnessing. Just moments earlier, he shoved her like she was nothing. Now he couldn't look away. Brooke flipped open the knife, poured whiskey over the blade, then set her fingers against Jennings' neck, searching for a landmark only trained medical personnel knew how to find. Corporal Sutter felt his breath catch. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't hesitating. She was preparing for a surgical airway, in the middle of a Marine bar. And every single Marine in that room realized something at the same time. Whoever this woman was, she was not what they thought, not even close. Brooke steadied the knife in her hand, letting the whiskey run down the blade in a thin brown line. The bar was silent, except for the rough, choking sounds coming from Master Guns Jennings. Marines who had been laughing minutes earlier now stood completely still, eyes fixed on the woman they'd mocked without a second thought. She didn't hesitate. Not even for a heartbeat. Brooke set 2 fingers against Jennings's neck, feeling for the exact soft point at the base of the throat. She found it instantly. Most Marines didn't even know the name of that spot, but she located it the way another person finds a familiar door in the dark. Cole stood frozen behind her. He watched the way she positioned her shoulders, how her breathing slowed, how her focus locked in so tightly that the rest of the room seemed to disappear around her. There was no fear in her, no panic. Her hands didn't shake. If anything, they grew steadier, as though her mind had slipped into a place she knew too well. Then she made the cut. A clean, precise slice, no wasted motion, no hesitation. The kind of cut only someone who had done this in worse conditions would dare to make. Marines flinched at the sight, but Brooke didn't blink. Her left hand held the skin open, her right hand guided the blade exactly where it needed to go. Jennings' body jerked once, then sagged. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Another Marine's voice trembled. That's a crick." "She's doing a crick." But Brooke was already a step ahead. She dropped the knife, grabbed the thick straw from a nearby drink, and bit off one end cleanly. She slid it into the incision with the accuracy of a surgeon in a full operating room, not a woman kneeling on a bar floor. Jennings's entire body turned a frightening shade of blue. Marine stepped back, uncertain, terrified, helpless. Brooke sealed her mouth over the straw and gave one steady breath. Jennings's chest lifted. It was small, barely noticeable, but it lifted. Brooke gave another breath, then another. Each one controlled, measured, delivered with the calm of someone who knew she was fighting for every second. The Marine stared as the old Master Gun's chest began rising on its own, slow and shaky but rising. The room went dead quiet. No jokes. No whispers. No questions. Just silence. Staff Sergeant Mason Cole felt the weight of that silence settle on his shoulders. Only minutes earlier, he'd shoved her, laughed at her, dismissed her. Now he watched her bring a dying Marine back to life with a steak knife and a bar straw. Every second felt like a slap to his pride, but this wasn't about him anymore. This was about the truth, punching him straight in the chest. He had misjudged her worse than he'd misjudged anyone in his life. Brooke sat back on her heels as Jennings' breathing steadied. She wiped the blood from her hands on a towel someone handed her, though she didn't seem to notice she had taken it. Her eyes stayed on Jennings the whole time, watching for changes, tracking everything silently, methodically. She didn't announce what she had done. She didn't brag. She didn't even look around to see who was watching. It was as if saving a Marine in the middle of a bar, with improvised tools, was simply something she expected of herself. The bar doors slammed open, and the paramedics rushed in with gear rattling at their sides. They pushed through the crowd, but when they reached the scene, they froze just like everyone else. The medic on point stared at the incision, the placement, the airway, the controlled breathing pattern. He whispered, "That's textbook. That's perfect." He looked up at Brooke with wide eyes. "Who is she?" Brooke didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her hands moved automatically, helping them transfer Jennings onto the stretcher, keeping his airway stable. She didn't explain the steps. She didn't list her training. She didn't offer anything except calm, steady assistance. When the medics finally took over fully, Brooke stood. She wiped her hands again, quietly, almost gently, like she was finishing something that didn't belong to the world of bragging or applause. Marines surrounded her, but none dared step too close. It wasn't fear, it was something else, something rare. They looked at her the way you look at someone who has seen and done things that ordinary people don't even imagine. Mason Cole swallowed hard. He had no words, not one. He had walked up to her like she was just some lost civilian. Now he couldn't even meet her eyes. Brooke didn't look at him or anyone else. She wasn't waiting for thanks. She wasn't thinking about the stairs. She had one more glance for Jennings as the paramedics pushed him toward the door. Only then, finally, did she breathe out slowly. The first time she'd let herself breathe any way except steady and controlled. Marines shifted uneasily, because what unsettled them wasn't what she had done. It was how she had done it, with that kind of calm, with that kind of mastery, with that kind of quiet power that didn't need rank, didn't need a uniform, and didn't need permission. She had walked in like a stranger. And now, every Marine in the room could feel it. A woman like that doesn't just belong in a Marine bar. She belongs anywhere courage is required. For a moment, the bar stayed frozen in that uneasy silence. Marines shifted their boots on the floor, unsure what to say or where to look. Brooke stood quietly near the table, hands finally still, eyes steady on the paramedics guiding Jennings out the door. Then, a voice cut through the room. Deep. Strong. Carrying the kind of weight you don't get from rank alone. Stand aside. Every Marine reacted instantly. Retired Navy SEAL Master Chief Daniel Riker stepped forward from the corner where he had been sitting unnoticed. Broad shoulders. Silver hair cropped tight. Lines on his face carved from decades of deployments. The kind of man you didn't have to introduce. Every Marine in that room knew exactly who he was. The entire atmosphere shifted in a heartbeat. Marines stiffened. Some stood straighter without thinking. Cole snapped to attention so fast his chair scraped the floor. Riker stopped in front of Brooke. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look confused. He just looked at her with a quiet recognition, like he had seen this moment coming the second she walked into the bar. He turned to the crowd. You all want to know who she is? No one answered. They didn't need to. He nodded once toward Brooke. This woman is Lieutenant Commander Brooke Harlow. A ripple went through the room. A few Marines blinked, trying to process it. Corporal Sutter's jaw dropped. Riker continued, his voice steady and clear. She served with our Special Operations surgical teams for years. She's done over 200 battlefield surgeries under direct fire. Under rotor wash. Inside caves. Inside blown-out trucks. Everywhere you would never want to be. The room stayed silent. She's treated Rangers, Marines, SEALs, recon teams, anyone who is bleeding and still breathing, and in all that time, she's earned a name in JSOC circles. He looked directly at Cole. She's the surgeon who refuses to lose a patient. Cole's eyes widened, then fell to the floor. He felt every word hit him like a punch to the chest. He had shoved her. He had mocked her. He had tried to force out the one person in the room who had just saved a Marine legend with nothing but calm and skill. Riker turned back to Brooke, his voice softening with real respect. I've seen what you do, ma'am, and so have a lot of men who are still alive because of you. Brooke didn't react. She didn't bask in it. She didn't smile. She just gave a small nod, as if she were accepting a burden rather than praise. The bar was silent in a way Marines rarely are. Not the drunk silence, not the awkward silence. The kind of silence that comes when truth humbles an entire room at once. For the first time, every Marine saw her clearly. Not a civilian, not a stranger, not a woman who wandered into the wrong place. Lieutenant Commander Brooke Harlow, the quiet force who once again refused to lose a patient right in front of them. Master Chief Riker didn't hesitate. He stepped in front of Brooke, planted his boots firmly on the floor, and raised his hand into a sharp salute. Not a casual gesture, not a polite nod. A full, formal salute from a man who had earned every ounce of respect he carried. The entire bar stopped breathing. A retired SEAL Master Chief, a legend in his own right, was saluting the woman they had mocked, shoved, and dismissed only minutes before. Every Marine in the room straightened without thinking. Some stood taller, some swallowed hard. Others exchanged looks, not sure if they should salute too, or stand still, or simply watch. They had never seen a moment like this inside the Iron Flag. Brooke didn't expect it. She blinked once, surprised, then returned the salute slowly and quietly, almost hesitant, like she didn't feel any of this was necessary. When she lowered her hand, Riker gave her a nod of deep respect. Behind them, the paramedics were wheeling Master Gunnery Sergeant Jennings toward the door. The old Marine's face was still bruised and pale, but when he saw Brooke, he lifted one trembling hand off the gurney. It wasn't a full salute. He didn't have the strength, but it was close enough. A gesture of thanks from a man who had seen far more battlefields than most of the room. Brooke walked to him and placed her hand over his for a moment. He tried to speak, but the paramedics told him to save his air. He still managed a faint smile. As Jennings disappeared through the door, the bar stayed frozen. Nobody picked up a drink. Nobody cracked a joke. Nobody even shifted their boot on the floor. Staff Sergeant Mason Cole stepped forward slowly, like a man walking through something heavy. His voice had lost all of its earlier sharpness. "Ma'am," he whispered, I'm sorry." Brooke looked at him with steady, gentle eyes. No anger, no resentment, no lecture. She simply shook her head once. "I only did what anyone should do," she said softly, but everyone in that bar knew the truth. What she did, almost no one else could have done. The silence that followed was unlike anything the Iron Flag had ever held. It felt carved into the walls, pressed into the wood, etched into the memories of every Marine standing there. Sergeant Rudd, who had joked about her wandering in from a museum, stood so stiffly it looked like he couldn't breathe. Corporal Sutter, who had watched her with curiosity from the start, now looked at her with something close to awe. One by one, Marines stepped aside as she walked through the room, not because she asked, not because she demanded it, but because respect made room for her. They moved with the same instinct they would show for a decorated general or a fallen brother being carried home. Brooke didn't walk faster or slower. She didn't change her posture. She just moved quietly, the same way she had entered. But now, every set of eyes followed her with a different understanding. When she reached the door, she paused for a moment, glancing back at the room, at the Marines who had mocked her, at the ones who had frozen in shock, at the ones who had learned something they'd never forget. No judgment in her gaze, only a calm acceptance. Then she stepped outside into the cool night air, leaving behind a bar full of Marines who would talk about this night for the rest of their lives. The night they learned what real strength looks like. Brooke didn't wait for applause or gratitude. She stepped out of the Iron Flag the same way she had walked in, quiet, steady, almost invisible. No victory smile. No attention drawn to herself. The door closed behind her with a soft thud, and the bar stayed silent long after she left. Inside, the Marines stood for a few seconds, trying to process what they had just seen. A woman they mocked and dismissed had saved a Marine legend's life on the floor of their own bar, not with equipment, not with time, but with calm skill earned from years of standing in places far harsher than anything inside those walls. 2 days later, the owner of the Iron Flag printed a still image from the bar's security camera. The moment Brooke knelt over Jennings, her hands steady, her eyes focused, her posture firm. He framed it and hung it on the wall beside photos of Marine heroes who had been honored there for decades. Nobody questioned it. Nobody argued. The picture simply belonged there. Staff Sergeant Mason Cole came by the bar that same evening. He stood in front of the photo for a long time, jaw tight, remembering the moment he had shoved her, thinking she didn't belong. When a group of younger Marines walked in and asked who the woman in the photo was, Cole told them the truth. He didn't spare himself in the telling. He explained exactly how wrong he had been, how he had judged someone without knowing a thing about her, and how she ended up being the only reason a Marine legend was still breathing. In the days that followed, the story traveled quietly through the barracks. Nobody exaggerated it. Nobody added drama. They didn't need to. The truth carried enough weight on its own. The narrator reflects, real strength isn't loud. It doesn't come from muscles or swagger. It doesn't announce itself or demand attention. Real strength shows itself when pressure arrives, when hands need to stay steady, when fear needs to be pushed aside so someone else can live. Brooke Harlow never asked for respect that night. She simply earned it. And the moral is simple and true. Real strength is quiet competence, the kind that doesn't need to be announced to be felt. Some people serve loudly, with medals on their chest and stories that fill a room. But many others serve in silence, carrying skills, memories, and burdens no one ever sees. They walk among us every day, at grocery stores, at gas stations, in crowded bars, quiet professionals who never ask for recognition. Lieutenant Commander Brooke Harlow is one of them. And so are countless others who have saved lives, lifted others up, and stood firm in moments that would break most people. This story is a reminder that heroes are not always the ones who speak the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones you overlook, until the moment their courage changes everything. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more military and veteran stories. These stories keep the courage alive for generations to come.